Okay, so 6:04, call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Chair Glines.
Present.
Committee members Lovelace.
Present.
Wolf.
Here.
Hintermeister.
Here.
Ramsden. Hutchison.
Here.
Grunbaum. Kish.
Kish.
Kish. Say it one more time.
Kish.
Kish. Okay, thank you. And Brown.
Okay. Report from the chair. I have no report. I missed the last implementation and governing board meeting, and so if you could just cover that as part of your stuff
Sure.
when you do your report.
Okay.
Okay. Seeing now's the time for public comments on items that are not on the agenda, and our lone audience person is agenda item 3, which we're going to move from 5, and you're gonna tell us all about the blackbirds that it's not good. Anyway, so for the first item, if I could have a motion and a second on the minutes.
Walt, I don't, sorry. I
Oh,
don't
I
mean to be a
skipped. I
pain,
skipped.
but yeah.
Yes, I did.
Sorry, I apologize.
Okay, no. I turned the
I
page.
have a couple of announcements.
Okay, okay. So, Public Advisory Committee member announcements.
Yes, all right. So a couple. One is very minor in that Committee for Green Foothills is now simply Green Foothills. We've undergone a branding change, and that includes a name change. So we are simply now Green Foothills. Changed our logo, changed our website, strategic plan, new strategic plan. Lots of interesting, exciting things. Okay, on to more important stuff. Last month in January, the Morgan Hill City Council voted unanimously on a resolution to protect Eurostack, Sargent Ranch, and Sargent Ranch has been an issue that's come up here as the Habitat Agency is interested in full purchase of the property. So just wanted to put that on the table. The draft environmental impact report, it looks like, will not come out until late summer, possibly early fall. So just that of note as well. The other piece would be Green Foothills is putting on an event on February 26th called The Future of Coyote Valley, which will be held at the San Jose Women's Club. This event is not just a celebration of the recent purchases, but also an opportunity to talk about what is the future of Coyote Valley now that those purchases have gone on, especially that of mid-Coyote Valley, as the City of San Jose undertakes a general plan review, and the county plans on updating its general plan starting in the fall. So this event will feature feature a panel of speakers moderated by Barbara Marshman, the former editor of the Mercury News. And on the panel will be a current board president and county supervisor Cindy Chavez, Mayor Sam Liccardo, Council member Sergio Jimenez, in which the Coyote Valley is in his district. Chris Reef, who is Assembly Member Osh Kalwa's Chief of Staff, as well as Andrea McKenzie of the Open Space Authority, and it's sponsored by Open Space Authority Post, Green Foothills, and the Audubon Society, with a whole bunch of co-hosts. So I can send around that flyer if the members are interested in receiving it.
Yes, please do. Okay,
and then finally, sort of tangentially related to our work is the Santa Clara County Food System Alliance has put out its Small Farms Report. This was actually funded through Measure Q Open Space Authority, their Measure Q Urban Open Space grant funding. So this report called Small Farms, Big Potential, Growing Resilient Local Food System, really simply addresses the question that's been sort of hanging in the air for a number of years around whether small farms such as, 40 acres or less, and we really looked at around the 10-acre size, and smaller, but we did go up to 20, 25 acres. Are they viable in our county? And it was actually Agricultural Commissioner Joe Davini, who's part of our Food System Alliance, who really wanted this question addressed, and that was the impetus also. Well, he spurred us to do this report. And we have 7 recommendations on it. It is a complement to the Valley Ag Plan, and this report was initially mentioned in the Valley Ag Plan. We had not yet written it, but the idea was on the table, and so it was mentioned in the Valley Ag Plan. There is an executive summary right here, and it does also feature farmer profiles, some of them here in our county, including Spade and Plow and Shunfat Nursery. This is all available on the Food System Alliance report, but as an FYI, the Silicon Valley Business Journal and the Morgan Hill Times have written articles on this, and I will be being interviewed by KGO Radio on Monday with regards to the report as well. Spur is having an event on this with panelists. I'm one of the panelists. Sam Thorpe of Spade and Plow is another. Michael Meehan, who is the county planner implementing the Valley Ag Plan, will be there. County Supervisor Susan Ellenberg will be a panelist as well, and Emily Schwing of Vegelution. And I think really just to wrap this up, we came before the Morgan Hill City Council yesterday to introduce this report, and Nick Thorpe of Spade and Plow came to talk about the barriers that Spade and Plow faces. And I think this is where there's a real nexus to the work we do here in terms of land conservation. Spade and Plow right now, part of the where they farm just right outside of Morgan Hill's sphere of influence in San Martin. You just have to walk right over the line. They're subject to a landowner right now who's been taking back some of the land. So they actually planted, and then we're told that some of that land was being taken away for the landowner's needs. And right now they're on a month-to-month lease. So you can well imagine you plant something one month and don't know if you will be there for the harvest a few months down the road. And that's not something that Spade and Plow obviously likes being under that kind of a contract, but they really have no choice. And that really speaks to the accessibility of this land in our valley and how important it is to permanently preserve this land. So I'll stop right there. Thank you so much for your indulgence.
Thank you. One quick question. How much of the land mentioned or identified is in what we call, or within the boundaries of the Habitat Agency?
Well, for the purpose of this report, we were really looking at the agricultural resource area, which is basically Coyote Valley down to the San Benito County line that we share. So all of it within the Habitat Agency's purview.
Thank you.
Chair Glines, if I might interrupt, I didn't realize that Abigail is planning to call in. So once I have her phone number, I'm actually just going to call her because she's the only one calling in, so I may have to interrupt you. Would that
That's
be
fine.
okay?
Yeah,
okay.
Of course. Okay. Who else has anything to say before we head on to the regular part of the agenda?
Nothing to report.
Nothing? We're good. Now I can flip it. Okay, the first item on the, or the first public comments for items not on the agenda. We don't have anyone in the audience, so we're going to move down to regular business number 1. If I could get a motion and a second for the, to approve the minutes of the November 7, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
Second, and no one has anything that needs to be tweaked? Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? And no abstentions? So we approved it. Number 2, selection of 2020 Public Advisory Committee Chair and Vice Chair. This is a year's term. I'm more than willing to step aside if someone wants to move in to here, that any chair is fine with me. And the same thing with Joseph. I do want to say that whoever is chair, probably the biggest duty outside of playing the running the meeting here is attending the implementation and governing board meetings. Those start at 3 o'clock, typically on a Thursday, and usually they go about 2 hours, and they're here as well. So does anyone want to, and I'll be glad to do a motion to have someone replace me. Okay.
The obligatory few seconds of silence and blank stares.
Yeah.
Joseph, are you willing to?
I'm willing to retain the position, but if anyone would like to serve as vice chair, it's also open for grabs if anyone wants it.
Well, I would certainly be willing to make the motion to have Walt continue as our chair. We
And
want to make separate motions? Or?
what do you think, separate?
It's usually separate. I
Okay.
don't know. I would defer to Michelle on that one.
Well, we can just be careful and do separates.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have a second to that?
Second?
Okay. All those in favor of having me continue on for another year, please say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? No abstentions? So, Walt, you're here again. Then I'll move to have Joseph do another term as the vice chair. Could I have a second?
Second that.
Thank you. And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? And,
It's a good time I can get her on the line. I have her phone number.
okay.
Sorry, you guys, for the interruption. I
No,
apologize.
we just passed the Joseph as vice chair.
You guys should have nominated her since she's not here.
Hello,
okay.
Vice Chair. Thanks for calling.
And again, I apologize for the interruption. It'll just take 1 second. I was ill prepared.
Hello, this is Abby.
Hi, Abby. This is Michelle with the Habitat Agency. I think we have you on the line, so you should now be able to hear the PAC meeting.
Great, thank you so much. I really
Sorry for
appreciate
the
it.
trouble.
Hello, everyone.
And
Sorry to
ju-
not be there in person.
Yeah, and just, speak up if you have something to say, or
I will.
someone might be a little not loud enough. Okay, so we're going to go to item 5 now. We have switched item 5 and 3, and so we're going to learn about the tricolored blackbird nesting and foraging monitoring project for 2017-18. Great pictures.
Thanks. We're going to talk about the most charismatic bird in the world, tricolored blackbird. It's not burrowing now. I understand that. Is that on? There it goes. Okay. Well, thanks for hosting. Thanks for having me out. We're going to talk a little bit about tricolored blackbirds. First, I want to congratulate Julie and all your colleagues on the historic land acquisition in Coyote Valley. Very amazing. And this will tie into tricolored blackbirds as well through this report. So we're going to talk about tricolored nesting in Santa Clara County. This was kind of the first survey conducted on the species across the whole county as far as a comprehensive survey. I'm representing Talon Ecological Research Group, a local nonprofit organization. So let's talk a little bit about trikes. You may know a lot about them, you may know a little about them, but I think it's important to kind of paint a picture on the history of tricolored blackbirds. In the 1800s, they were considered the most abundant bird species in California, and especially in Central Valley, and the southern coast and the coastal range there. In 1930s, there was 2 to 3 million tricolored blackbirds as a population. And they're pretty much endemic to California. There's a few populations that are found in Washington and Oregon, but they're pretty much endemic to California. So they're pretty important to us here in California, and the reason, they're a covered species. And, so in the 1970s, they declined to 50%, and over the last 90 years, there was an 80% decline with this species. So they're declining quickly, and they continue to decline. Between 2008 and 2014, 63% decline in just that small time frame. The last statewide survey, which is every 3 years, which will be again this year in April, which I'm coordinating the countywide one. In 2017, there was 178,000 birds. We're talking, these guys are colonial nesters that would nest in, millions of individuals in a single colony. Now we're lucky if we have, 500 to 10,000 in a single colony. In 2018, they were finally listed as a state threatened species, and they're predicted to go extinct in 50 years with current trends. So it's high conservation priority for the state, as well as local organizations as well too. No, they're not. So this was a very contentious decision by the commission, the state commission, and they fought it for so long because it's contentious with ranchers. And so they decided not to list it, and then they used some of the data that they had, and they said, okay, this should be a listed species, but we're not going to consider it right now. We need more information. And so finally in 2018 and in 2019, they listed it as threatened but not endangered. Let's see. So here's the range, and you can see highly endemic, and it has a pretty wide range here, but actually it's very spotty when you look at breeding colonies. So that just kind of paints the picture of where they're found. I'll talk a little bit about kind of our objectives, our results, and our methods to find those results as well too. And so this was the first comprehensive survey of tricolored blackbirds in the county, like I mentioned. And our goals were to determine where birds were breeding, how many birds were breeding, where they were foraging, because we know that foraging grounds and quality of foraging grounds really drives success in breeding, reproductive success in this species. And then to better understand local ecology and potential threats as well too. And then hopefully coming up with some recommendations, and maybe we can come up with some local conservation effort locally here. Here's the study site. So within the permit area, but also outside the permit area in Santa Clara County. And let's see, some of the methods. So we looked at both breeding and non-breeding, and our surveys took place in just one single breeding season in 2017, which was March 1st to July 31st. So we wanted to look at all suitable habitat. And the way we did that is we mapped it out and essentially looked for habitat that could potentially be breeding habitat. And we'll talk about what that is in a second here. And we surveyed it 2 to 5 times throughout the whole breeding season. Suitable nesting habitat included wetland, which is the primary habitat historically they've used, but they've shifted recently to use more grassland, oak savanna, and also agriculture. But typically breeding was only within 100 meters of a water source. So water is really important, riparian, wetland, marshland habitat. The primary substrate is that they nest in is cattail and tule or bulrush. And the secondary habitat or substrate is agriculture, crops, willows, thistles, mallow, but they rarely nest in that. But we considered it suitable habitat, so we wanted to just make sure that birds weren't using this. They can use it for foraging, yeah, absolutely. So when we found a colony, and it was active, which was pretty rare, unfortunately. We did 2 to 4 visits per week. We really wanted to get information on when they were nest building, when they were laying eggs, when they were feeding young, and when they were fledging young, because that could be important for conservation efforts and land acquisition as well too. So each visit, we would be there for an hour, do a point count. There'd be at least 2 people. Here you can see our crew here. 3 to 4 people usually is what we had out in the field. And we were doing 2 essential point counts for 20 minutes to assess how many individuals of tricolored blackbirds are in this colony. It was a tough task. These birds are coming in, they're leaving, they're settling down, and you don't know who's who. So it's a challenge to get an exact number. So we came up with this method with a lot of assumptions to calculate the number of individuals in a colony, because there's no easy way of doing it. And the high count was considered a number of tricolored blackbirds present out of the 2 surveys, the 20-minute surveys we did. So we obtained number of females and males present, number of behavioral events. This could be courtship, this could be displaying, this could be copulation, this could be nest, or feeding nestlings. And then we also wanted to know kind of where are these birds coming from, potentially where are they foraging. And so we recorded direction they were going and direction they were coming into the site. Often they had the same line they would go out every single time, so we had an idea where they were going. Often, though, we could not determine exact foraging ground because it was on private land that we didn't have access to. And then if we could prey items, but this was tricky because we're about 50 meters away, and they have these little insects in their beaks, so that was challenging, but we did see a few prey items. During the non-breeding season, so when we shifted to the non-breeding season starting in August, we really focused on areas with current and historic records, which included eBird or just CNDDB records, word of mouth, and we really focused in those areas, but we did survey pretty much the entire county that we had access to. Typically what we would do is road transects, drive all these roads, and stop along certain areas and conduct point counts once we saw the birds to get number of individuals and habitat characteristics. So this is what it looked like. You can see this picture right here of a flock of tricolored blackbirds. Often they would settle and it'd be hard to see them, and then sometimes they'd lift up. But when you found a blackbird flock, typically it wasn't just tricolored blackbirds. There'd be red-winged blackbirds in there and brewer's blackbirds as well. So the tricky part was, are these tricolored blackbirds? If you see a male has a nice white stripe on the wing, and that's easy, but females look identical to red-winged blackbirds. So we did our best determining that. So here's the good stuff, the result. Go for it.
You just said they look identical to the redwing.
The females look almost, so we have a subspecies of red-winged blackbird in California. It's called the bicolored redwing. And it looks different than the nominate subspecies. And so our one that breeds here is almost identical to the female tricolored.
So
there's like a little bit of like darker on the underbelly, but in certain light you can't see that.
Okay, so that's really hard.
It's nearly impossible.
Yeah.
And if people think they can identify them, especially at a distance, they can't.
Yeah.
So we're looking for males essentially to be sure that, hey, so our counts are probably low because of that. Especially if it's an all-female flock. So
and they can be all-female flocks?
They can be, they can be young birds and females, and you're like, okay. I have no idea, they're blackbirds. Blackbird species. So here's kind of the news here. So in the last 40 years, there's 7 historic sites in Santa Clara County, and we surveyed all of them, and multiple times. And only 2 out of the 7 had nesting tricolored blackbirds. And that equals a 71% decline of nesting tricolored blackbirds in the last 40 years locally here. Not good, not good. So 29 of 44 sites, so 44 sites we identified as suitable breeding habitat, surveyed, and 29, so 66% of those 44 sites had habitat that, hey, let's check it out again. This seems like good habitat. And you can see a picture on the screen here of what good habitat looks like. This is cattail right here, and that's the dominant substrate they're using. 4 of these 29 sites had tricolored birds present. Not saying they bred, but they had them present. And that's 9% of sites that are suitable. Not good. The exciting news of the study is we found a new colony. It's near a colony, the largest colony in the county, which is in San Antonio Valley, which I'll talk about here in a second. But it's a colony that's on private land. And so we did not have access to it, and we found it late in the breeding season, but we know it was successful with young fledged from that site. We could just watch it from the road, but we couldn't go actually into the pond. So 3 of 4 nesting colonies were successful, so that's good. That's the one positive. 75% success is good. 90% of these birds breed in the Central Valley, and the last 10 years it's been 100% failure. Every single colony has failed.
In the Central Valley?
In the Central Valley, which is 90% of tricolored blackbird range. Dr. Meese at UC Davis is concerned, and he says these little colonies, even though they're little in the Central Coast, are critical for maybe the survival of the species. Let's see. So here's where our surveys took place. So these are the 44 sites that we identified as potential nesting habitat that we looked at 2 to 5 times. The green dots, which are right here, here, and here. Whoops. I'm new at using this thing. Well, I'll just clear that because that's terrible. There. No, it's not going to work. Here, I'll do this. Okay, so here, Cañada de los Osos Ecological Reserve, so public land. This is Clara Reservoir, another public land, and then San Antonio Valley Del Puerto Canyon Road, which is
And the 2 up there are outside the plan area.
yeah,
But
these right here.
yeah, I'm just thinking about Ryan's presentation. I think I need to have a conversation with Fish and Wildlife Service and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to see if we can amend the plan without going through some long drawn-out process to maybe include this in the conservation of the blackbirds and try to work with those private landowners. More to come on that. But
Yeah, that'd be exciting because I think it's a critical area. I mean, it's the largest colony in the county. And there's potential other habitat. We've identified other habitat within this area, but we did not have access during this study period. So there may be more birds up there. Phenology, so the timing of these breeding events could be critical, for conservation. So we recorded this, documented this. And typically what Dr. Meese from UC Davis, he's like the leading tricolored blackbird biologist, he thinks that these Central Coast birds that are breeding here are failures in the Central Valley that show up here on their second brood. It's a species they've discovered that it'll actually breed in one spot, fail and maybe be successful, and then completely leave that nesting colony and go to a completely different site. It could be hundreds of miles away. We found that's not true. These birds here locally are resident birds. They're here year-round. They start during the nesting season when it's supposed to start in March. So you can see arrival at these nesting colonies is March 29th, which is typical for tricolored blackbirds in the Central Valley. Displaying starts, copulation start, and fledgling occurs in July. So the breeding season really ends mid-July. So it's fairly long breeding season, and that's because typically they double clutch and sometimes triple clutch, have 3 clutches, which we saw double clutching happen. Here's a female, which looks identical to our red-winged blackbird female. So even Dr. Meese, who's been studying these birds for like his whole life, it's hard to identify, and he knows that, and we all know that. So here's the largest breeding colony in Santa Clara County, the Del Puerto Canyon Road colony. It's on private land. Here's a look at it right here. And this habitat, these breeding colonies, where these colonies are at, it's minimal habitat. There's not that a high abundance of cattail. They don't need much. But for some reason, they're just not using all suitable habitat throughout the entire county. So wherever these sites are, these are critical sites that we need to really focus conservation effort on. This is just a little seasonal creek right here that's dammed up as a stock pond. It's right along the road. Anybody can go sit there on the road and watch this colony breed. They've been there for quite a few years now. And we monitored it during 26 days between March 8th and July 26th. The highest count we estimated was 510 birds, which sounds like a lot, but it's considered a small colony. San Benito County, just south of us, has the largest colonies of tricolored blackbirds that are successful, which is a recent event, 25,000 birds in a single colony. So when you compare 500 to that, it's minimal. This was a successful colony. We recorded 60 fledglings, and that's just what we observed. There might have been many more than this.
Did you have any interaction with the property owner?
We did, and not where this site was. We never saw this property owner, but across the road there was another property owner that stopped once they saw us. And they were interested in the project, but they didn't really want us on their property. But they said, hey, we can give you contact information for that, but they never did. But down the road, where the new colony was, those property owners were open to working with us on it.
But can't you go to the county and get who owns this land?
Yeah.
And write them letters?
Absolutely, yeah.
And they can ignore them.
Yeah, we'll do that, Walt, yeah.
Yeah,
I got to get permission from the wildlife agencies to purchase land or do management actions outside the plan area. I'm hoping they'll say yes, given the state of the birds.
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah. They were
But
open
yeah,
to it.
I'll coordinate with Ryan on in figuring this out.
Well, yeah, and I saw, out Kenyatta Road, there's lots of local landowners who probably would consider, saying yes, but you got to ask them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And the span of this project was only over a single breeding season. So if we were there the following year, yeah, we absolutely would have made those contacts. Yeah. I didn't know how sciencey we wanted to get with this. I threw out a couple graphs here, but this just shows kind of behavioral phenology. So when displaying starts, when nest building occurs, and you can see nest building occurs throughout the entire season. So these birds are double clutching. Typically they're synchronized, so they're fledging young at the same time, they're feeding young at the same time, and fledging young at the same time.
With the 500 in that one area,
Yeah.
is there a risk of interbreeding, and therefore why the birds are not, they're not increasing?
Yeah, I think they're reaching carrying capacity. So the abundance of the substrate, as you can see in this picture, there's not much substrate there. So I think it's kind of reached carrying capacity. And the new colony we found is only 2 kilometers from this site. And that may be birds from this site that are moving over there. We'd really have to band them and really study it hard to really figure that out. But that's possible that it's hitting carrying capacity. But then you'd say, well, why aren't they everywhere then, right? It's because they're declining. But, 60 birds fledging seems like significant if you're talking about only a couple thousand birds. But these birds maybe don't stick around. Maybe they go to the Central Valley. We don't know.
Well, just theorizing, it used to be when I was a teenage driver, I would have to clean my windshield all the time. I don't have to clean my windshield at all. So therefore, my opinion, there's no insects.
That's the same example that Dr. Meese, who lives in the Central Valley, Davis, that's the same exact example he gave. He said, I used to drive this corridor, this freeway, to go to work every day, and my car would be covered with butterflies. He says, I drive that now, not a single butterfly on my car. So pesticide use and prey availability is probably a limiting factor. Maybe not locally here, but for
climate change too.
Absolutely, yeah. All those are factors just put on top of it, right? Yeah.
But has that been scientifically figured out that that is the issue. It's been analyzed to say that is the
For the
cause.
pesticide or?
For the decline in the
Oh,
poppy.
yeah, so that's what Mies has done a lot of research on. It shows that insect abundance has declined dramatically, and that is a limiting factor, and that's why all these nests in the Central Valley are failing. No food. They can nest, they can build nests, but if there's no food, they
So
fail.
then the cause is at least perhaps started with pesticide? Is that the
Potential.
theory?
I think it's habitat loss and then pesticides in these small little wetlands that exist still, that are so small and probably a lot of concentration, high concentration of pesticides.
And then,
I
of
would
course,
assume.
climate change.
And then throw climate change, drought conditions.
Yes.
Okay.
that's-
And globally, the insect, there's been some studies done, which you guys have probably read about in Germany and globally, about the decline in insects globally, the biomass.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is tracking with that.
Yeah, great questions. Yeah.
Hey,
We're on the
Ryan.
right track.
Have you guys had a chance to look in Henry Cove at the wetlands?
Nice. Good question. We looked at a couple sites there, but we did not go in the back country really far. We had discussions with the head ranger, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he was willing to take us back there. It was late in the breeding season. We figured all the birds were gone at that point. But for future studies, that's a critical area. There's a lot of ponds and stock ponds back there.
Huge lakes. I mean,
Huge
Mississippi
lakes
and
too,
Quaker.
yeah, exactly.
And I go back there a couple of times a year, and especially in the spring.
Yeah.
This is, next month will be prime wildflower viewing there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't know what they are, but there are, looks like millions of birds.
Yeah. Yeah,
Either-
it's something to look into,
Yeah.
absolutely. There could be tons of, not tons, but there could be colonies of tricolors there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is just a graph which you have in the report, just looking at number of individuals, 510 being our highest count. You can see it fluctuates a lot. Some days they're very active. It depends on kind of what's going on with the colony. If the females are just sitting and incubating, you rarely see birds go in and out. And so that's why we want to monitor it every 2 to 5 days to get a better estimate. San Antonio Valley, here's the new colony right here. Right off 130, you can't really see it. Here's the stock pond and the levee that you can't really see into it. So hopefully we can get access to look at that colony. Is it sustainable colony? Is it still, thriving or not? Here's Cañada de los Osos, and you can see this is just a small stock pond with limited substrate. And we were actually surprised there were so many birds using this. There was such limited substrate, you could actually see through the cattail, and you could actually see the nest, and you could see the nestlings. It was pretty cool, because that's the first time we were able to actually observe that directly. Because usually they're deep in the thick substrate. So at most we saw a little over 300 birds in that colony. Here's Clara Reservoir, and we actually super disappointed that there was no colony, no nesting birds that we observed, because this has the highest abundance of substrate in the entire county. Let's see, 2015, we monitored this colony, and there was over 500 birds, maybe even up to 800 birds. And the first year we found it, they were successful. The second year we went back and monitored it, and we found that crows pretty much wiped out this colony. This single crow, there was actually 2 crows, and here's one of our camera trap photos. You can see the egg of, here's a red-winged blackbird right here. But it would take eggs and nestlings from this colony, and it had complete failure.
What, beside crows, are
Ravens.
raptors also a predator for,
Raptors, did you say? We did see any raptors. What we saw was ravens and crows,
okay.
and raccoons would pull down the reeds and just pull them right down to the nest and grab
Okay.
them out.
As I was wondering about predation, if you can see the nests at the other site, isn't that a bad thing? Isn't that just?
Yeah, that's what we assumed. Like, oh, this is going to fail. Like, everything can see this. We can see it from, 50 meters away. Yeah, but for some reason, it did not fail. I don't know what the reason was. We didn't observe any crows right in the vicinity of the colony, so maybe there's just a limited number of predators there. But definitely there was raccoons and other stuff, it's like, why not? So I don't know. We didn't observe it though.
Would rainfall have an impact if it's a drought year, which we've had several?
Yep.
So that could be another measurable thing.
Yep, absolutely. They will most likely not nest if there's no water below the substrate or in the substrate. We actually observed this with this Clara colony. The water district reduced the flow into the reservoir receded, and all the substrate was exposed. And that may be another reason why it failed as well, too. All these predators could get in easily.
Well, and I just looked at current reservoir levels in Santa Clara County, and the largest is 39%, and some of them are down to 30%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, the reservoirs, Shasta is at 112%.
Right.
But our reservoirs here are really low, and if we don't get any more rain, we're going to be hurting.
Yep, totally agree. Yep, and that's part of failure in the Central Valley as well, too, is drought conditions. Yep. And the insects are correlated with rainfall as well, too, so.
But this study year, 2017,
Yeah.
wasn't that was the wettest year on record, the wettest year
It was.
in 122 years. This should have
Right.
been gangbusters. That was after the 3 years, a 300-year drought. It was from one extreme to the other. That was.
Yep,
So this was
should have been the year.
should have been the year
Right.
well, if they could have recovered from the
Yep,
drought that
you're right.
quickly. But
Yep.
unless I'm mistaking my springs here.
No, I think, 2017 was a wet
It
one.
was-
Yeah, you got it.
Too wet.
There you go. This is why we need some more research and information on this.
Can't downswing that fast.
Here's a little video I got. This was not during this study, but prior study at Clara, and this is one of the crows that nabbed these nestlings of red-winged blackbird, which you see here, and tricolored, which nested right next to it. I think that's a bullfrog in the background.
So just, the crow's just not bothered by them, they're like
Oh, the
rats.
crow's just sitting there with the nestling. I don't
Yeah.
care. Have the
Yeah.
I have your nestling. But you'll see it does take off here in a second. But we found that the red-winged blackbirds and the tricoloreds are segregated in all these colonies. And the red wings are much more aggressive than the tricoloreds. Here's the crow taking off. Okay, you get the point.
But you see that all the time with all species of bird.
I know.
They'll go after them, but
They're
the predator
voracious.
birds are
Yeah,
not.
they've increased in dramatic numbers now because of us. And they feed on everything. So looking at foraging, we had 61 observations of foraging. Our goal was to identify as many prey items as possible, but that just wasn't really possible. But we did discover what habitats they were using and what the quality of the habitat was and what they, what they were found foraging in. And typically it was low, about 9 inches on average, and even a little bit lower, about 4 inches was ideal. And that's primarily when we saw them foraging, that was the habitat they were in. All foraging was within 2 kilometers of nesting colonies. And if you look in the literature and in the Central Valley, they would travel up to 10 miles. And so we didn't see that. So that shows that, hey, maybe there's a good foraging grounds close to these areas, and maybe that's why they're choosing these certain small little ponds, is because of foraging and prey. But weird thing in Coyote Valley, there was a number of birds. I think the highest count we had was 40 birds during the breeding season, but there was no birds nesting at Calero, and the closest colony was 30 kilometers away. And so these could be birds that have failed in the Central Valley and have showed up during the nesting season. It's possible there's a colony nearby that we didn't find, not likely. since we surveyed all those areas. But interesting that Coyote Valley was kind of the center for these birds. Prey we observed was grasshoppers, caterpillars, crane flies, robber flies, and midge flies. So that's important. And then habitat that was utilized primarily was grassland habitat. Some was grazed by cattle, some wasn't. Oak savanna habitat with a scattering of trees was about 18%, and ag was also important, 13%, but not as important as the Central Valley birds. And then you can see other habitat they would utilize. We had tricolored blackbirds foraging in chaparral habitat, which has never been documented before. So that was interesting. And then non-breeding season, we identified 122 sites that could potentially have foraging tricolored blackbirds. And then only out of 122, 19.7% had tricolored blackbirds, only 24 sites. Much lower than we thought. And the surprising number with this single year of study was 140 individuals was the highest number we saw on any of these foraging sites. When usually it could be thousands of tricolored blackbirds in Coyote Valley or other areas. We didn't see that this year, or 2017. During the non-breeding season, they're using mostly agriculture, so agriculture is really, really critical for these guys in the non-breeding season as well as the breeding. But all observations were within 500 meters of water, so this comes back to water and climate change, even in the non-breeding season, that's important. So just kind of, it's 71% decline. You could say we found a new colony, so maybe it's a little bit lower, but tricolored blackbirds continue to decline in Santa Clara County. These small colonies of fewer than 500 individuals, if you look at the historical data going back to the 1990s, not too long ago, there were colonies of over 2,000 birds. We just don't see that anymore. So suitable breeding habitat is here. There's a lot of sites that could potentially hold breeding birds or sustain breeding birds, but it's just not being utilized. So what are those limiting factors is a major question for us that we couldn't answer during this study. So future studies to determine, is it prey? Is it habitat? Is it foraging grounds? What is it? Is it rainfall? Is it those abiotic conditions that are critical? We don't know, but more research needs to be undertaken for that. Let's see. So we found these are resident colonies. These are not migrants or movement from Central Valley. And we found that there's 3 areas that are key for this bird. And that is San Antonio Valley, which is outside the permit area. Coyote Valley, which is the large land acquisition just happened, which is so important for these guys and other species. And the Kenyatta Road area as well too. So we identified those as foraging grounds and breeding sites that really need to be focused if we're going to do any conservation effort with tricolored blackbirds. And then another issue is these are mostly private lands. There's some public land that these birds are on, but we need to work with these private landowners to really protect the species and manage the species better.
Cattlemen's Association, because, stock ponds seem to be something there.
Yep, I think that's and that's one of my recommendations is work with these landowners, ranchers, Cattlemen Association, I think could be important for this. So I think continuous biological monitoring, this was a single season, so it may not paint the whole picture. I think it gives us a good insight on what's going on, but maybe more future studies determining, are these birds still in these colonies? Is there new colonies being formed? Research on these limiting factors, which could be prey and foraging, is critical. And the protection and management of areas with these breeding colonies and foraging areas is a must to maintain tricolored blackbirds locally in the coastal areas, which could be critical for the species on a whole. And areas that are already protected, like Kenyatta, like Clara, they should be managed for the species. That could be water, that could be substrate, That could be some sort of enhancement of the foraging areas in those areas. Maybe alfalfa could be an important crop. As we know, higher productivity in alfalfa with tricolored blackbirds foraging. And yeah, so that's the same one. So enhancing for prey. And I think working with alfalfa farmers, alfalfa is kind of a dying crop, unfortunately, in Santa Clara County. I know with the alfalfa farmer in Coyote Valley, he was sick. I don't know his status now, but he's kind of given up farming. He's handed off some of it, but it's on a much smaller scale than historically it was. I mean, Julie can speak on that a little better than me. But working with those alfalfa farmers is critical because studies show that alfalfa has high productivity of insects, which increase productivity of these tricolored blackbird colonies.
Then that answers your question, because in the valley, everything's now almonds.
Yeah, it's shifted. Yeah, right.
That's a great point, Kyle.
Yep.
How many alfalfa farmers in Santa Clara County? 2, 3?
Yeah, I think, is it even that many? Yeah, I don't know. You probably don't. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And in Coyote Valley, a lot of those alfalfa fields have been converted to almond orchards. Yeah.
What are we going to do with the Tilton Ranch farm?
Well, they do grow hay on part of it, so we could look into alfalfa.
alfalfa takes a lot of water.
It does.
Yeah, that's the problem.
It does.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of water.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
So we'd have to become farmers.
you would.
Lease it out.
Talk to the open space authority.
Yeah, lease it out. We'd probably have to pay somebody to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, because you don't make a lot of money on alfalfa either.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be large scale, too. This can be small scale.
But I have a note here to talk to Post and OSA about alfalfa in Coyote Valley.
And is it,
You know, you can't be prescriptive with a farmer and saying, because it came up when I worked in Placer County, because there was tricolored there, so it came up for tricolor burrowing owls, and in particular Swainson's hawk. And you know, putting an easement over a land and then telling the farmer, well, you can only grow these 2 crops, alfalfa being one of them. So it's tricky. It'd have to be, they're growing the crop and we're paying them to grow the crop, and we can't rule it out. And like Kyle said, it uses a lot of water. Yeah.
is
do
alfalfa
almond
that
orchards,
much
though.
more
Oh, they do.
productive
Yeah,
than-
they do. Yeah,
Also
they
good
do.
point.
Yeah.
We had an
And-
observation here.
No,
Yes.
Yeah, how much more productive is alfalfa than other grasses?
I couldn't give you a number. There is a couple papers that are out on the subject, but it's a lot, though. It's considerable. But if we could, you know, maintain grasslands and manage grasslands, it could be just as productive as alfalfa.
Looking at natives, you know, try to push
Yeah.
it that direction.
And I think it's going to just take, like, just kind of seeing what works, trying a few different things maybe and seeing what takes. We may manage Coyote Valley for tricolored blackbirds, but they may not show up.
And that's the risk, because they move around a lot.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing with the burrowing owls, as we've seen. It's
Yeah,
trial and error, and you're not even
exactly.
sure if that's going to roll.
Yeah.
How long is it going to?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
we're in the life support with burrowing owls now, if you guys know. And as
Yes.
Ryan knows, because he works for us through Talon on the burrowing owl stuff.
Well, there was the whole article on the Super Bowl and how often it's actually Googled the wrong way, and superb owl is something
Yeah.
that comes up a lot, and so there were, yeah, I know.
Went viral.
Yeah, no, there was an article, and it started off with that, talking about the Super Bowl, and said, well, I hope you, by the third sentence, it's like, sorry to disappoint you, but this actually is going to be about owls. And it was a lot on the burrowing owl. Actually, Shani
Yeah.
was quoted in that one.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, cool.
I want to Google superb owl.
Yeah.
Just to see
All
what-
sorts of things will come up. All sorts of species. But we love the burrowing owl the most.
So on the recommendations, who's going to pay for that? Are there grants? Is there any, I mean, who's going to be taking these steps?
These steps, well, the first 2, we can apply for a grant. The grant funded Ryan's work previously, and I think we could make a case to the state that this is worthy of a research grant, and we can provide matching fund, the agencies can. This third bullet's difficult because the best one colony's on a state land, and the state has proven resistant to us collaborating with them. Henry Coe was supposed to be part of the plan area. It's not. They didn't, and I won't relive that history of why, but it was basically had to do with our conservation easement being placed over state land. So then it's working with the private landowners, and they're outside the plan area. So if we can get permission from the wildlife agencies to do conservation outside the plan area, modify the plan to include San Antonio Valley without going through a major amendment process, which I hope they'll be flexible and allow. The alfalfa thing we talked about, it's tricky. And let's see, what's number 4? We can try working with the state wildlife at Kenyatta, the OSO, and seeing they'll work with us. I won't rule it out, but we haven't had a lot of success, unfortunately, working.
There, just give them money.
Yes. It's what we do with Fish and Wildlife right now at Warm Springs to do things for the owls.
One person is in control of that.
Is it Henry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the biologist is Terrace.
Yeah.
Henry, yeah.
So Henry and, yeah.
Henry Coletto.
Yeah, he would get the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's.
I have to think about that one.
Because, one is on private land, or most of them are on private land, and one's Kenyatta de los
2
Osos.
of them, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
So
potential
that's
at
kinda weird
Clara.
Yep.
that it's on a private land being probably ranched or something like that, and
Yeah.
they're still there.
Yeah. Well, you
That's
got,
crazy.
yeah, you got the big ponds, and
Yeah.
they don't,
It's undisturbed. It's
yeah,
right along the road.
it's undisturbed.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And there's no one with the name tag running it or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll find out who this landowner is once we get permission to explore. If the wildlife agencies say, yeah, go for it, they shoot us down, then there's no need for me to bother the landowner. So that doesn't mean that the Nature Conservancy or other conservation groups couldn't bother the landowner, but it means that we can't do much outside the plan area. But I'll look into it.
Well, and also coming up is the election. John Laird from Santa Cruz, a former state parks director,
Right.
is the assumed favorite to win that.
Which election?
The state
Assembly
senate.
member.
Oh, state
Is
senate?
it- Oh, he's going for Monning seat?
Yeah,
Oh, Monning seat? Oh, so Monning's termed out?
Yes.
Monning's turn.
And Bell too, right?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Wow. That's a powerful, I hope.
Well, and he's a very liberal Democrat.
Yes. He was instrumental in the creation of the Sierra Conservancy, which influenced what we did and didn't do in the Sierra Nevada range. Yep. My previous job.
One more quick question,
Yeah,
Ryan. So I know that the new pond over at the Clara, the new park there's a pond, a wetland.
San Vicente? Is that
Yeah,
San
I'm
Vicente?
thinking about,
Yeah.
surveying recovered wetlands. Did you see some recovered wetlands or new wetlands that may have been established, within the last, maybe 5 or 10 years?
Not really. It's mostly stock ponds. Yeah, we didn't see any new.
The pond at Clara looks like suitable habitat if it's cattails, it's, has water, has year-round water because of the cattle issue there, so.
Is this the pond below the dam?
This is the new wetland that was recovered from
Okay.
Was this the project we did?
yeah.
Was this
Yeah,
recently?
it's kind of small, and it doesn't, It doesn't have the right vegetation yet.
Oh, is it? Oh, I think I know,
It's-
I know
yeah,
what you're talking
you-
about.
you-
We surveyed it.
yeah.
Yeah, it has potential. It's small and there's not a lot of substrate. It has potential. We could put more substrate in there and, yeah.
Yeah, right now, it has pond turtle and tiger salamander in it, which is the good news.
Nice. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And then
So-
I noticed at Basona, they had a floating barge with a track hoe on it, and they removed all the cattail from the lake at Basona. And it used to have 15 or 20 feet of cattail,
Yeah.
and that's all been removed. And so I'm wondering if there's some lack of consideration for, and it's affected the songbird population there, and the waterfowl population.
Yeah.
This is Vasona, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a good-sized lake with a lot
It
of
is.
It is. with a
grassland
lot of
around it.
Substrate, yeah. I think foraging may be an issue and maybe, because these birds do disturb fairly easily. There's a lot of recreation there too.
Paddle boats and stuff, right?
Yeah, and just walkers and joggers and bikes and everything, but has potential though.
So,
It's something we looked at. We didn't see any birds at that location.
so the map I gave you guys, if you want to look at property number 13, that's a one we just recently acquired, and it has a 14.5 acre pond on it. It's the property that we refer to as Sorello.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And we're going to be doing a major restoration on the property. The focus is the stream, but also trying to enhance that wetland for tricolor blackbirds.
Excellent.
So that's one thing we can do now, and that's one thing we were planning to do down there.
Yeah, and I'm meeting with Post and Open Space Authority in a couple weeks, our team, to talk about the new site and potential management for tricolor blackbirds, either through wetland restoration. I know that's been discussed for many, many years at that location, but there's potential.
That Coyote Valley?
Yeah, the Coyote Valley.
Yeah, we have brought it up to Post and TNC, so I'm glad or TNC, OSA. So I'm glad they're going to talk to you, because there's 2 ponds on Sobrato South that have potential, I would say.
Yep, those
Yep.
are good
Yep.
sites. Yep,
Yep.
definitely.
Yes. Did we, you have to refresh my memory.
Yes.
So did we have specific conservation strategy kind of goals with respect to tricolor blackbird, because it is a covered species?
Yeah.
Or did we kind of think that just a side effect of covering all the different habitat types would, be sufficient to?
It was primarily the latter. Yeah.
Because I don't remember anything. I don't remember us talking about
You are
anything
correct.
specific. Yeah.
So, but in cases of restoration, and this is what we brought up to OSA and Post, is we can be a funder of restoration on the Coyote Valley lands that would focus on burrowing owls, tricolor blackbird, maybe pond turtle. I don't see a lot of potential for the amphibians there, but who knows? Over time, perhaps. So they're aware of our interest. I'm glad they're going to be talking to Ryan. And that's one thing where we could be more proactive, and if we're doing a marsh restoration, we could focus on tules and increasing the density of the tules and the cattails.
Mm-hmm. Just the other question I had was just, I guess, a little bit about the natural history of the tricolor blackbird. That is in kind of these healthy populations that we once had.
Mm-hmm.
Do they then just have a lot of site fidelity where they would just come back, stay in one place for years and years and years and years?
Typically, yeah. So there'd be these large colonies of 30,000 birds, and they would come back to that area, but sometimes they would completely abandon it. Reasons we're not sure of why, and go to other areas. And then certain years they'd be totally successful, multiple clutches, and then the following 5 years would not nest there. So there's some sort of fidelity, but not like other species, especially not like burrowing owls and other raptor species.
But I guess other social birds are like that too, like herons and egrets.
Right.
Kind of have that
Right.
kind of behavior too. They can be there for a long. same place for a long
And
time.
all of a
and
sudden,
then
they're gone, right?
poof,
Yeah,
for
exactly.
whatever reason.
From what we've seen locally here, though, yeah, there's high fidelity on these sites. They've been there for a long time. And except for Clara. Clara, they'll come in, and then next year they'll fail, and then they'll be gone. And now they're currently, looks like they're extirpated from that site, which is, in my opinion, is the highest quality of habitat for tricolors in the entire county, right there.
In our area, in the Bay Area, are there, like, do we have any coastal population, like if you went to the coast over Calero or around San Francisco Bay?
Historically, but currently through the statewide surveys, they're extinct in Santa Cruz County and beyond. Yep, there was some historical large colonies. The stronghold for tricolored blackbirds currently San Benito County. Debbie Shearwater has been monitoring these colonies. She's found massive colonies, 30,000 birds that are fledging young successfully, and that's the stronghold. And we could potentially do the same with Coyote Valley and some surrounding areas to get to that point potentially. But all of those colonies are on private land. She has working relationship with all of those, so she can go out and monitor them and study them.
I mean, that's really interesting because this is a little bit reminiscent of the Burrow and Owl story, where we kind of looked at some places outside the plan area,
Right.
which seem to have the most resilient or strongest populations, and then kind of made some arrangements with the state to do work outside of the plan area.
Yeah, it's too bad that San Antonio Valley, and because we can't be a player in that N3 acquisition either, so. Yeah. So it's too bad that was dropped from the plan back in the day.
Right.
But I agree with your assessment, and that's the approach I'll take with the wildlife agencies. It's, I don't know if they were aware of these colonies that Ryan found. They may have been, I don't know, but they were probably hanging their hat on some of the historic data that he referred to, that we would protect things around Sargent Ranch, we'd protect things in the Calero area, and somehow that would solve the problem. But it's proving to be not the case. Yep.
That's why where the colonies are, that's important, but we can enhance it, I think.
Yeah, and Coyote Valley's an opportunity.
A lot of opportunity.
Because that was, per the plan, that was thought to be going to be developed over time. Yeah.
And those Calero birds that were nesting there were foraging in Coyote Valley. We'd watch lines of them, hundreds of tricolored blackbirds in single file lines, going over the ridge, dropping straight down into the valley. So we'd sit on that side, where are they going, what habitat? And they're all dropping in alfalfa fields when they were massive in Coyote Valley along Laguna Avenue. But yeah, so thanks to Ed for all his support on this. He's been great. It was funded by a matching grant through the Natural Community Conservation Program, local assistance grant. And Ed was a big supporter in this and understood how important trikes are. And it's obviously a covered species, but and then Brenda Blinn, who was with the Fish and Wildlife, and we had a couple field assistants. They're off and doing their PhD at UC Davis, most of them now. And then Dr. Meese was a great guy for all his expertise and advice. So, any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
And then Ed, is if you could give us updates as,
Absolutely.
something happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
We can have Ryan come back too.
I'll be back anytime. Thanks, guys.
Especially if you get moved up in the agenda.
What, you don't want to stay for the AB 1600 report?
So if you guys are really, really interested in blackbirds, I mean, one of the definitive books was written by Oliver Jaramillo, who's a biologist and a tour guide leader, lives in Half Moon Bay, I believe. So you got, a nice volume, all on blackbirds.
Wow.
I own it, it's a great book. Blackbirds aren't just blackbirds to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anyone, if they want to go crow hunting, they can do it in my neighborhood.
Yeah, we've got,
There is a season for crows. Little known, but
Really?
That's right, I knew
Yeah.
that, but I'd forgotten, yeah.
Yeah, but I live within city limits and have neighbors. Okay, so then we're bouncing back to item 3, AB 1600, Development Impact Fee Fiscal Year 2018-19.
Yeah, and this is just a report for you all to review and receive. If it's per State Assembly Bill 1600, which is the Mitigation Fee Act, where we have to report to the state that the fees that we're taking in are being accounted for correctly and will be spent as the project mitigate for these impacts. The fees are being spent for as these projects expect them to be, and as the state expects them to be spent. So it's a nexus study, essentially. And if you have any questions related to it, I can answer it, but it's pretty straightforward. It's just a reporting.
Do we need a motion and a second to accept the report?
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
if we could have a motion and a second?
so moved.
Second.
Thank you. Does anyone have any discussion? Ed, do you want to hit any highlights or just move on?
No, I'll move on to the audit, and I'm going to give you a presentation. I apologize, the auditor couldn't be here, so you got to suffer with me giving you the presentation on the audit.
Okay, so then I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? No, and no abstentions. Okay, so now we're on the auditor's report.
Thank you. So this is the financial report for the agency, also known as the audit. So this is a message from our CPA, and he was pleased to present the conclusions of the audit both to this board and to the governing and implementation boards. And he has given an unmodified, clean opinion on the financial statements as a whole. And I will move on. So this is what I'll be talking about: the audit process, the financial metrics, the net position, activities, and conclusion. So this is the process. So this is his process, so he does the planning to understand what we're about, the field work, not in the sense of a biologist. Sampling, no, he's not doing sampling of water quality. He's statistical and non-statistical based sampling associated with risk and the financial position of the agency, and then he has the conclusions. So it's a risk-based approach and assesses the risk of the agency. So these are our assets, and these percentages are it's sometimes quite high, but you have to look at the numbers, the dollar difference versus the percentage difference. So with the cash and investments, that's really our cash position, and it went up slightly from 18 to 19. So that's money that we have on hand in various accounts. The accounts receivable, there's a huge jump there, but that's mainly reflective of grants that we got in, and in particular the $8 million from Valley Water that was used to purchase Baird and Davison. And I thank Valley Water for that generous commitment to us through their D7 program, that Julie was involved in as part of that larger group to make sure that that money did go as for its intended purpose. You can see the interest income. A lot of that has to do with the money we have in something called the LAIF account. It's a state low interest, high interest money market account that's available for special district and local governments. And that's where most of our money goes that we don't need for day-to-day operations. It was at, 2.5%. I just checked today, it dipped below 2%. Those non-stock investment funds have gone down quite a bit in the last few months. Prepaid expenses speaks for itself. The assets are the land that we still own. We own that property that Caltrans gave to us. It's the 55-acre piece on Pacheco Pass. It was assessed, and also the truck. So those are our assets. And the reason why it went down was depreciation on the truck. So our total assets went up by almost $8.5 million, and the majority of that is related to the Valley Water contribution. These are our liabilities, so accounts payable and other liabilities. So this has to do with outstanding invoices and bills as of June 30th that hadn't been paid yet. It's just an accounting number that there was still these liabilities that were from the previous year that slipped into the next year. Unearned revenue, that's has to do with, there was a project that the city of San Jose gave us the money for, and then the project never happened. So we've been trying to give the money back to San Jose. I don't know if that ever happened. But we have tried.
Maybe it's like credit for them. They'll come around and say, remember that 12?
Yeah. We, at some point we'll take it off the books and it'll just be classified as revenue. But as of now, that's why it's there. Compensated absences. So 3 of us had a PTO, so that's time we didn't take off, and then 2 of our employees are hourly, and they do have sick balances, and that's what that represents. So the net position, that shows the total cash that we had on hand, restricted and unrestricted, and net investment in capital assets. That's the truck again and the land. So for a total net position of $27,392,000.
So why is the unrestricted in the negative?
That had to do with a miscalculation by the previous auditor in classifying AB 1600 funds.
Okay.
So that's running a negative because it was put in the wrong place, and it was caught by Alex, the auditor before David, and it's still on our books. It should have been in the restricted.
All right.
I'm glad I remembered that. So.
Very impressive.
I remember something about that from
Yes,
last year.
we did have the
that there was a-
conversation.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember it being complex.
So these are the revenues. So our fee revenues were not that great, considering the economy around here, just under 4 million, 3.7. But our grant revenues were fantastic. So our total revenues for the year were 12.4 million. And that doesn't reflect grants that we got that we hadn't spent yet. Like the Section 6, we got a $2 million Section 6 grant that we're hoping to spend this year on Tilton, and this year on more of the UTC lands. So once we spend those grants, they'll show up on the books too.
Well, I'd like to look at this in a positive light, I guess, in that it might be less revenue, but perhaps it's indicative that where we're building is in the better location where we should be building, as opposed to.
I agree. Seeing that development on Cottle and the stuff that hopefully will happen at Deerdon, and the stuff Morgan Hill's been doing, that's the kind of development you want to see. Yeah. It's better for farming and better for conservation. Fees be damned, I agree with you.
It's better for everybody around.
Yeah, yeah. And so I can try to answer any questions related to those numbers, but it's telling a story over the last 2 years, and it's you can see that the difference is related to grants versus non-grant income. These are the expenses, and based on comments of the PAC, we changed how we classify administrative to assign staff time to the appropriate cost centers, and it tells I think the true story of what we're doing. In Tara and Jerry, we're always more focused on Area 2 and 3, technical permitting, conservation strategy. So we started doing that last year, and you can see that the administrative did go up a little bit, but it's telling a better story of what we're doing. There's another slide later that shows where that change started to happen based on input from the committee here.
But 79% difference in total expenses?
Yeah, that reflects restoration projects that were supposed to start construction in 18 but didn't, so all the expenses happened in 19. And that's directly related to conservation strategy, and in particular, the San Felipe project, the full cost of that happened in 19 versus spread over two years, and the Clara ponds, or not Clara, excuse me, the Coyote Ridge ponds. So we thought those projects were going to start construction in 18, but because of permitting from the state agencies, mainly the Water Quality Board and some others, things got slowed down. So that's what that reflects, the difference. And it's primarily in that conservation strategy area, the difference. But that's why we increased expenses. And this shows our cash analysis. You can see this year, and this is a bar chart showing what was shown in the spreadsheet for 2019. But you can see it over time.
And you said that jump was predominantly related to the grants?
In 18, it was fee revenues. Yeah. Going from 17 to 18. 18 was a really good year. We had over 10 million in fee revenues. And then we spent money, but it got replenished in 19 with primarily grants coming in. Mainly that Valley Water grant was the big one, because they deposited the money into our bank account versus a lot of these other grants, you don't get them until you do something. This shows the liabilities, which is, and it was primarily, as you'll see it slowly, liabilities increase due to an increase in unpaid invoices at year end, and 5 vendors were responsible for 45% of that total. And these are the absences that I discussed. In the beginning, there were none. And as you add employees and you accrue PTO and sick time, it grows. We have a cap on the sick time, by the way. The PTO we don't, but because that's combining vacation and administrative leave, but we do have a cap on how much sick time we pay out. This is the revenue analysis. And this gives you an idea. So in 18, it was primarily fee revenues that came in. 19, it was primarily grant. And you could see the trend over time. Then this shows the different fees that were paid. Over time. More of the same stuff. 2018 for Owls, that reflects one project, Meadow Fair, primarily. I don't remember 2015 what was paying the owl fees then. I think several projects. And this shows as we've matured as an agency, we've started to increase the amount of money we spent. There was the dip in 18 only because of the timing of those construction projects. But I think if you look at 17, 18, and 19, an average amount, that's give you a good idea how much money we've been spending over the 3-year period. And if there hadn't been that delay in the construction, I think those three numbers would look very, very similar. And again, this shows by category. So you could see in 17 where we were basically putting full freight of salary into administrative. And in 18, we started distributing it across the 3 cost centers. Oops. I skip one here. Yep. No, I didn't. Sorry. This is telling the same story that I explained earlier, but showing you over time that we've really ramped up conservation strategy, starting in 17. Yep. So this presentation was an overview of the financial highlights of the agency. And I will do as David said, if you'd like a further review, please refer to the report. And if you have any specific questions that I can't answer, I can definitely pass them on to David.
Anyone have any?
I have a quick question, Ed, and this is just kind of for my own general interest. The difference between the fees collected in 2018, I understand that there was a large grant for 2019 that sort of balanced that out.
Yeah.
But fees decreased in 2019 significantly.
Yes.
And this is a fee-driven organization,
yes.
Right? Are we tracking? Was that grant just a sort of an outlier that kind of set us ahead, or?
That grant was definitely an outlier. Okay? There isn't going to be another $8 million from Valley Water, but we're hoping to get $10 million from Fish and Wildlife Service through their Section 6 program this year. And I've heard some early rumblings that we may get the full $10 million. And until I get it in hand, I won't count my chickens before they're hatched.
And how are we tracking for fees in 2020?
I projected, I think that we would be in the $4.5 million range. I don't remember what we said in the budget, but I'd already told the board I didn't expect fees to go, revenues from fees to go up very much over the next couple years. So that's the reason why I've been very conservative in adding staff, because of that reason. And everyone's talking about a recession in 2021, so if not sooner.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, Ed, you're back up.
is it the EO report?
Yes.
Okay. I can just stay up here. So, actually, I'll sit down. So the first item is just to give you a little overview on the endowment. This is what I do with the boards every year, or every meeting, and this is what I'll do with you all too. So to date, we've invested almost $1.5 million into the Silicon Valley Community Foundation Social Responsibility Fund. And as of the 5th of this month, our investment has grown to a little over $1.7 million. So it's doing okay. Advocacy, kind of the big stuff on the horizon are these climate resiliency bills. There's two of them, AB 1298 in Mullins and SB 45 Allen. And we've been tracking them and working with the California Coalition. I was in a conference call with Mullins himself, a lot of other people, and we all had an opportunity. I appreciate how he handled that. We all had an opportunity to say what was important, what we wanted in the bill, and I made a pitch for funding in that bond for NCCPs and money for the Wildlife Conservation Board. Federal, I'm going to Washington next week as a part of the National HCP Coalition. There'll be folks from Texas, Florida, the Midwest, Defenders of Wildlife, and TNC will be part of it. And I will be meeting with the staff of Lofgren, Kana, Panetta, and Eshu, and the staff of various House and Senate committees that oversee Interior and Natural Resources, so both Republican and Democratic staff. And last year I met with Rubio staff. I'm expecting that'll happen again this year. We've got Senator Scott, also from Florida, Harrison Feinstein, we've got meetings set up with them, and possibly Cruz of Texas. Unlikely, but possible. There's a lot of HCPs in Florida, Texas, and California, and then they're scattered throughout the states. We also meet with Department of Interior and Fish and Wildlife and OMB. The primary talking points are the importance of regional HCPs. People have various reasons why they like them. Infrastructure is important for some people, and streamlined permitting. More large-scale landscape conservation is important for others. Some people care about both. That's why there's bipartisan support for this program. The administration in the Department of Interior, the appointees seem to be hostile or don't understand what we do or don't understand that we're in a partnership with the federal government to implement conservation and streamlined permitting. So the Section 6 program is continuously being zeroed out by the administration. The Senate and the House put the money back in. When the Republicans ran the House, they were putting the money back in too. So it's kind of an odd situation we're in where traditionally it was a program that both parties liked, but this administration does things differently, and we're trying to work to educate them to stop doing that. So they keep thinking our programs is like, they keep mentioning eminent domain and federal ownership of land, and we keep telling them, no, it's not federal ownership of land, it's a voluntary program. We don't have, most of our agencies don't have eminent domain powers, so there seems to be ignorance, to be blunt. Mm-hmm. And there's a letter every year by Congressman McNerney, and I always ask our delegation to sign on to it. I'll talk about our challenges here locally to them. I won't bring that up to Senator Rubio, but we'll talk about more of the national stuff. So grant updates, OSA got $1 million for Tilton through the Priority Conservation Area program. we got one along with OSA and Point Blue for Pajaro River for restoration on the OSA property that we're working collaboratively with. I mentioned the 10 million. One of our lag grants this year, one is for developing a fire management plan and strategy that Malik Road fire, the kind of extreme response by CAL FIRE really kind of was a wake-up call for all of us. So we're going to try to develop a plan and hopefully educate them on, hey, sometimes it was in May, that fire, letting it burn would have been kind of the smart thing to do. They came in with their retardants and big tractors and kind of tore up the landscape, unnecessarily so. The fire was started by the gun range down below. And Parks is aware of that. Monarchs, big concern of ours right now. It's not a covered species. It may end up becoming a listed species. We're trying to get ahead of it, and we've incorporated milkweed into our San Felipe project, but we're going to be doing specific meadow restoration projects that are going to focus on monarchs, and there's grant programs now available for that. We'd be working with OSA and county parks and others to establish that, basically butterfly garden for monarch. Restoration update, Pacheco's the big one. It's, I mentioned the tricolored potential there. There's also potential to do a lot of sycamore alluvial restoration. We are concerned about Pacheco Dam and how that may affect this. We're having close conversations with Valley Water, and they understand that. High-speed rail is down in that area. High-speed rail should not affect this project. So we're proceeding and hoping to start construction in 2021. We got some money from Valley Water, and we got a lag grant for design and planning. And the Valley Water grant was for $500,000. The rest of the funding for it is coming from the agency. And the Valley Water money will be used partially to focus on steelhead, not a covered species.
The Balsa Road fish passage,
Yeah.
what is that, River Creek?
Yeah, it's Uvis. Is it right? Is it Uvis? It's the one that goes by, thank you, by Christopher. Yeah, okay. And it's a fish ladder, but more of a naturalized channel fish ladder. So we're going to get, Valley Water again has been great. They've been working with us, and we got 1,700 stream restoration credit for the Habitat Agency. It hasn't been constructed yet. They're still working through the final design and permitting. But we got approval from the service and the department, and they said, yeah, you can, and to no cost to us. Yeah.
Take the freebie.
Exactly. And Pajaro, the funding I mentioned above will help pay for working with OSA and Point Blue on restoring those properties that OSA owns off of Fraser Lake Road in that area. And that part of that property is currently farmed by, I think the guy grows green beans, so that'll keep going on. So it's just expanding the riparian area about 70 feet from top of bank, and then the farming will continue. And so it's an example of a landscape that has multiple benefits. So now the acquisition, I think when Jerry spoke to you guys in August, was it August? No, November, he said you wanted a map, and I do listen. So here's a map to show where the properties are, and there's a legend down in the lower left. One mistake I noticed today on it, the Coyote Ridge, we already transferred, OSA bought it, we have our easement over it. So the pending transfer is for the Tulare Hill wedge property.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I saw that, you have East Coyote Ridge UTC here on this.
Yes, and that is a pending sale, yeah. And that's I guess you would call that in negotiations pending, so kind of that maroon color, or sort of pink color.
Okay, separate from obviously
Yeah.
the Coyote, the other, the
Correct.
Coyote Ridge, not the
Correct.
Ridge, which is, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And it shows Clara on here too. We had a really positive meeting with County Parks on, what was it, Tuesday? So hopefully we'll get that done this year. I don't know, it's been a journey.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that.
But the good news is Baird, which is number 6 on here. We closed escrow on December 23rd at 604 acres. It's, of that 604, about 350 is serpentine. You have 4 of the rare plants there, including Coyote ceanothus. It's one of only 3 occurrences in the entire world. The butterflies there. Not sure what else is there, but we know that about the plants. I saw the plants there, so I can verify it.
So on the Baird parcel, the Coyote ceanothus is one of 3 in the world?
Yes.
You said?
And so about a third of the occurrence is on Baird. The rest of the occurrence is on Davison.
Okay.
So Davison, which is later in this, it's one of the little bullets that come after this on the next page. It is, we're going to close on that next week.
Yeah, okay, so a third was on Baird and the rest is on Davidson.
Correct.
Okay. And this is one of 3 in the world?
Correct.
Of the
Yeah.
occurrences known?
Yeah. So Punpeck, which is Santa Cruz Mountains, you'll see it 10 and 11. Peck is the smaller of the 2. We co-acquired that with Post. It'll be enrolled in the reserve system, and ownership will eventually transfer to County Parks. And County Parks is going to be a partial funder of it too, so we will get some of our investment back once they distribute the money to us and Post.
So this is Punpeck that's going to go to County Parks?
Correct.
Why would it go to County Parks?
They have a park across the street.
Okay.
And there's a landowner near, and then you can see Mount Madonna, which is just to the south. So this is an important linkage for them,
Okay.
trail linkage.
I see, all right. Okay.
And that's why they're going to put some money in it eventually.
So while we will, so that, if we're going to transfer to County Parks, then we cannot consider it part of our reserve system?
Oh, we would, yeah. We'd put a conservation easement over it. There's an existing road that's perfect for a trail.
Okay,
It's really a beautiful oak woodland property.
all right. So we would not be affecting the habitat?
no.
In other words, because we're using the
Yeah.
existing?
Yeah.
All right. And-
There's at the bottom, I'm sure they'll want to do a small staging area, but there's an old cabin we got to demolish down there, and there's an area which would be perfect. That won't be included, but that's a couple
It's
acres.
incidental.
Yeah.
Okay.
East Coyote Ridge, that's the one that Julie was referring to earlier. Talk about a struggle. WCB, we submitted the appraisal.
Remind me, WB?
Wildlife Conservation Board, they oversee both the NCCP funding and the state administers the federal Section 6 program, which is a little unusual. Usually in other states you work directly with the federal government, but in this state, Department of Fish and Wildlife gets involved. And WCB is a division of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. They're kind of their own separate entity, sort of the land acquisition arm of Fish and Wildlife.
Okay.
So they're great to work with. I got no complaints, but all appraisals have to go through the Department of General Services, and they're challenging. And it took a year to finally get the appraisal approved. There's a lot of reasons why it took so long, but it's pretty crazy. So we got the approval last night, that the appraisal was approved, just in time for this meeting. So we will close on this in June, I believe, or I should say summer, June, July. And it is going to happen now. And Section 6 money will go towards it. State NCCP money will go towards it. Moore Foundation is helping to fund it, as is OSA. And that will be transferred to OSA with our easement over it eventually.
That's 2, and that's going to get, okay. So where that is located, that looks like, I mean, that's not far from Bailey, right?
Correct. Yep. That's number 1.
Number 1.
Okay. And then, yeah, then Coyote Ridge is already
Yep.
under OSA.
Yep.
Okay.
And some of the other green around there is county parks, the
Yeah.
motorcycle park,
Yes.
the shooting range.
Yeah.
And then that darker green is, or some of those other greens, I think, are the land trust lands over there. Yeah, VTA has land over there, and, yeah, and who else has land? Valley Water has some land over there. So you're starting to get kind of a core of protected land in Coyote Ridge. To the north is Richmond Ranch, which is ZNL Holdings, and then beyond that, you all know who's beyond that, YCS.
Who's still embroiled in a
Yep.
lawsuit with the county.
Yep. The lawsuit against us and the Fish and Wildlife Service was dismissed by the judge.
And was that over
They claimed that because they were having problems with the county and the city getting their development approved, that they were going to develop part of it, conserve part of it, and now that was off the table, the property would never be able to be conserved, and they said they would stop managing it for the natural resource function benefits, I guess you'd say, and therefore the biological opinion for the habitat plan was null and void because their property was so critical, and I was told I said that's not true.
Yeah.
It would make the conservation strategy harder if we couldn't acquire that property, but there's plenty of other serpentine property out there for us to acquire to make up for the loss of that. Plus, over time, that property may become available to purchase. So, the federal judge threw it out.
I'm sorry, I'm not entirely clear, and I apologize, folks, because I've fought the YCS's development intentions there on that, and like I said, the YCS is unfortunately notorious for suing over the habitat plan, first over the EIR, now this. They're suing the county. This is twice they're suing the county over trying to get this development there. We were actually subpoenaed along with other groups for our records. They're just that's just the way they function. So I'd like to understand a little bit further here that the lawsuit was brought by YCS against the Habitat Agency.
The Habitat Plan, I should say.
Habitat Plan.
And the Fish and Wildlife Service.
And the Fish and Wildlife Service. And the claim was over the biological opinion being null and void.
Because by not allowing the development, that meant conservation
could not occur.
Could not occur.
It wasn't biologically valid, the opinion, because we're just not going to manage the land, so it's just going to go to heck. And so there's no value.
And we offered to buy it from them.
Yes.
It would take a lot of money. No, there's no dispute there.
Yes.
And I think we could raise the money over time, but we have offered to buy it from them.
Yes.
And they know that.
Okay, and so the judge said that there was no merit to the case, that the
Correct.
biological opinion was null and void.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, but they could appeal.
With YCS, apparently this project is worth, I don't know what to them, because they keep throwing lawyers at it, and it's fascinating.
They could appeal, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But I hopefully they'll save their money, yeah.
They could be making money if they could just sell the property.
They could.
Just move on.
Given when they bought it, they could make a lot of money.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes, they could. They bought it decades ago. Yeah.
So, yes, unscripted additional commentary there
Yes, yeah.
from me.
Have our lawyer present? Do we have to have our lawyer present to have that discussion?
We might have to, who knows? This is,
I don't think I revealed anything that you couldn't find out on your own if you looked at the court records.
yes. they're
So-
out there to find.
Yeah. So the Tilton, I wish them the best, and I hope that someday they come
Come to
talk
the
to
table,
us,
yeah.
and, because we would gladly buy their property. Tilton Ranch, fingers crossed, the family signed the purchase and sale agreement. We're trying to line up the funding. DGS hasn't approved the appraisal yet, so that's the last step. But this property is super important to the conservation community in Santa Clara County, so if for some reason there's a hiccup here, we'll move forward and with other funding sources if necessary. But I'm hoping to be able to use Section 6 funding here in WCB and CCP funding. So hopefully when we meet in August, I'll have some great news for you that it closed and that it is a property that'll be protected for ranching and recreation and conservation in perpetuity.
Just one question on that for clarification, and I can take this offline with you afterwards, but just looking at your PPA that you sent when we were discussing this issue, I have two numbers that I'm sort of struggling with. It seems that there was a 1,462 acre piece. So all of Tilton Ranch is 1861? Or that's actually the purchase that you're doing?
Yeah, 1866.
Okay, because I found
Yeah.
1861 in the documentation, so I was trying
Yeah.
to just line up my numbers right.
Yeah, there could have been a typo there. Yeah.
In one of them?
Yeah, mine or somewhere. I don't, yeah, but that's the correct number.
1866?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's two parcels. One is 1806 and one is 55.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. And all of Tilton, so. And
Oh, it should be 61. Yeah, I wrote that wrong there.
Okay, so it is 1861.
That's my typo right there. Yeah.
Sorry, folks, for this.
Yeah.
This minute stuff, but I'm
No.
writing an article on it. So
Yes.
I'm trying to get my facts.
I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. And just again to understand, and then I'll get off of this.
Yeah.
You mentioned that is not all of Tilton Ranch. There is still a small piece.
Correct.
And that acreage is how much that is not going
So
to?
one of the family members is going to retain 10 acres, and she's going to continue to live on that homestead, that land. And the family is selling, I think, 55 acres plus the ranch, so around 60 acres, which includes the ranch complex and some of the hay fields. That's going to be sold separately.
And that's as we were discussing?
Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
You're welcome.
White dot in the middle between 5 and 6?
What's that?
Is that kind of the white, little, what looks like a little white dot on the map in between?
Oh, no, that's
Different?
a separate thing.
Just-
It's surprising it showed up on there. Good eyes.
I
That,
did not, like,
that's,
I'm like, there's this
that's,
little puzzle piece right there.
Take an extra cookie home.
so the
No, I-
family sold, I'm assuming the family sold that. That's an event center, winery off of Willow Springs Road.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, and the
Yeah.
views from there are spectacular.
Are they?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I know which, I
Okay.
can't think of the name of it, but I
Well,
know.
Liao owns it.
Yes, that's right. Now, do they
Yeah.
always own it, or?
No.
Yeah, but they own it now. Okay.
So I'm assuming that's that. That's
Willow
my
Heights.
guess.
Well, that's what it is. That's
Yeah.
what it is, yes.
So that's not the celebration party in June, like hooray, that's not?
No.
No, okay.
Oh, wait.
On the
Oh,
Habitat Agency's dime.
dime, right? Yeah, yes.
No, we all
Pump
just.
it up on the expenses. that
Yeah,
we just
I'll try to
went over.
explain that on
Go on
the,
our own dime
I'll
and
try to explain
celebrate.
that on the AB 1600 report.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, all right, so so out of so the ranch, essentially, if we were to look at the full ranch, we'd be looking at a little,
5 and 6.
Yeah.
7 is Davison.
Yeah, that's true. Baird is really part of the larger Tilton
Correct.
property.
Correct.
Davidson being separate, but yeah, I was sorry, I'm just wrapping it up all in my mind, how big it was.
And,
so around probably like the 2000.
Really appreciate the family selling Baird to us. It was super important for Anderson Dam. The clock was ticking because the Ceanothus incurrence was impacted a few years ago, and we had 5 years to either create an occurrence, which is challenging, which we're doing, but it's challenging, or protect one. And I really appreciate Janet and her family and working with us on that. And she understood it was important for us, and she's very connected to those properties, and I think she's glad that it's not going to be developed. Yeah.
Wonderful
And,
legacy.
yeah, and we're going to continue grazing because grazing's super important for what we do. Mm-hmm. So Alan Renz is currently the grazer, and we'll continue with him in the near term.
How do we acknowledge that with a plaque or something like that?
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, we could.
The history, we would definitely want to.
Oh, you mean on the property?
Yes, on
the we can definitely do something like that, like a plaque. Yeah,
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
To acknowledge all that.
Yeah.
You brought up Wrens.
Yes.
The cattlemen kind of have a problem with, not him, but
Okay.
out-of-county ranchers have been getting a lot of open space.
Is he an out-of-county rancher?
Yes.
Okay.
He's from Truspinas or Piscinus or something like that.
I knew Seth,
So-
Polish name, was from Mariposa.
Yeah, and their response time is like 2 hours for an incident or something, and we just find it strange that we know why, because they're spending the money to get the specialists to write their applications for them and everything.
Okay, well, we should talk more about that, because that's not what we want to do. I thought he was from around here.
Yeah.
So Janet brought him on.
Yes.
Yeah,
There's,
yeah,
because, there's big diffusion about
Right.
that. so,
right.
yeah.
No, that's good to know. Yeah, we should talk more.
Okay.
No, I would rather support the local ranching community, personally. Yeah. At least he's got a good reputation, but yeah, I can see, yeah, I understand. So Clara, I mentioned, new one is 8 and 9. We're working with county parks. It's over by Anderson Reservoir. It's Woodward and Bersani. And you can see them kind of nestled between,
Is this right off of the Coyote Highlands?
yeah, which I'm surprised isn't showing up on this map because it is protected. Because it's right across it's right near those properties.
Yeah.
You can see them. Yeah, I'll mention that to Greg about that being green. And the mistake over here too. Get that fixed.
Going back to the Richmond
Yeah.
Ranch,
Yes.
we were looking at buying that at one point.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. There was just a real difference in valuation. This is where an appraisal really made the deal challenging. And, I mean, you have to do an appraisal, but the appraisal came in so low compared to what the family thought the property was worth. It kind of split the difference between what the family thought it was worth and what the appraisal thought it was worth. And Z&L Holdings, they're out of Shanghai, but they do things in the U.S., primarily California. They bought it. And from what I heard, they want to build a city there. So I guess they haven't talked to their neighbors.
They've talked to YCS,
Yes.
and maybe together they feel they can get this done.
Yeah,
Good luck.
yeah, I know. So it's too bad. But we have sent inquiries to them, hey, would you want to maybe sell some of your land, do conservation easement? They never responded, so. So I didn't know if we were going to buy that, but when that's our fear with the Tilton Ranch is Chinese investors or foreign investors. I don't need to single out China, but foreign investors don't understand local land use, don't understand the local culture around here, don't care probably in some instances.
It's a dollar deal.
Right. Yeah. So.
Line item on there.
Yeah. So, that's what it is.
Well, it was
Yeah.
like dealing with
Yeah.
IBM in New York.
Yes.
When we
Yeah,
tried to buy their site.
Rancho El Toro, I mean, this person has, U.S. resident.
gone now.
He bought the Lamont. So there are some super
Yes.
wealthy people that are buying up a lot of the landscape here. Yep. And,
With our,
I mean, they have a right to do that, and investors from other countries have a right to do that, but it just makes our job that much harder. Yeah. All right, thank you.
thank you.
Oh, one
Oh,
final
then-
thing, yeah, we're going to join the Monarch joint venture, just final.
Shocker.
Yeah, exactly. I had to fill out this really complicated application. Yeah, it was, I thought I did, yes, it was shocking. All these questions about who we are, why we want to do this, what our goals, yeah.
Oh.
I had to read parts of the Monarch joint venture recovery plan to answer the questions.
Wow.
I said, gee, I just want to join your organization.
I just want to be supportive.
Yeah, well, we don't take any riffraff, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you sure you want to plant this,
Right.
this plant for our butterfly?
What are you going to do for us?
Okay, does anyone have anything that they would like on a upcoming meeting?
No, I think that, Abigail, are you still on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's,
I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person.
Well, thanks for calling in.
yeah.
Sure, lots of super interesting stuff. I took notes.
Well, I know that Abigail had mentioned, I think, 1 or 2 meetings back about some sort of presentation potentially around Eurostax / Sargent Ranch. But is there a sort of a pause until the EIR comes out before we go down that road? Is there any thought around that?
No, I guess it would depend on what you want to talk about. We weren't the lead. Abigail's agency, organization, and Post were the leads. So I would defer to them if you wanted just a general policy conversation. But yeah, I can probably get somebody to talk about the habitat values there. And Post is doing a lot of. I don't know if you've seen. I just made a note to myself to send this video to you of a coyote and badger.
Yes,
That's gone viral.
It even made the local news. I mean, that's how.
It was on the Colbert Report.
Yeah. Oh, did it make it to the Colbert?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, my husband was like, I was in bed, and he's like, look, Julie, this is your territory here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess who knew? I know there's a lot of examples of cooperation in nature. It's not just all competition. But this coyote is like super excited that this badger. He's waiting for the badger to catch up to him, and they're going to go hunt squirrels probably together.
Yeah.
So
it is really cool. Were you here for Pathways for Wildlife, Tanya and Ahiga, when they did their presentation? It was two. So it was actually Ahiga who caught that. That's on camera, and it's one of their night. It's at night, and it's really fun to watch. It's just a coyote. He's basically his friend, the badger. He's just like egging him on. Come on, we got to go through this culvert. We got to get going. We got things to do together, and it's just, it's gone viral.
it's a buddy movie.
Yeah, it is. It's a buddy movie. Yeah.
So yeah, Sargent Ranch. I did get a call from a rancher about the interest in the property. So there's a lot of interest in the property, the tribe, the ranching community, the conservation, open space community. There's a lot of interest in keeping it as a kind of multi-benefit landscape and for
The
different-
tribe that is not recognized by the federal government.
Right, I can't comment on that.
I think that we have to be very careful when we use that. I think there's a lack of recognition. There are over 100 tribes in the U.S. who are not recognized, federally recognized.
Yeah.
And getting recognition is very difficult. And the state of California has had a history of trying to oppress them from getting recognition. So I think we have to be very careful in using that as a way to try and discredit the Amamutsan tribal band. So I would be cautious in putting that out there as if it somehow lessens their claim.
Well, it is a claim.
As I said, if you understand better the tribal history, and perhaps you should sit down with Chairman Lopez to better understand that, and also do a little research on how difficult it is to get tribal recognition and the amount of money it can cost, then perhaps there'd be a little bit more awareness as to why some tribes have yet to get recognition.
So talking about it, it would depend on the topic. But when the EIR comes out, I don't know how the county handles that, if they would come here or not. But but yeah, depend on the topic. So our main interest is conservation values. So we could try to get the right person to come here to talk about that, if that's something that Abby and the other board members would like.
I brought it up because Abby raised it, so I wanted to let
Yeah.
the opportunity for her to speak on it.
And is that within our area?
Yes.
Then yes.
Okay.
I mean, I support that.
Okay.
I was fine, I just wanted to know if Abby wanted to weigh in on.
Abby, what are your thoughts?
Well, I do think that the EIR being still pending makes this issue still pretty background for us who are waiting to see the outcome of that analysis and of the Planning Commission's vote on whether to approve a permit for the sand mining facility. I think once we know more, things might start moving again, but right now, at least at my organization, we're in a pretty back-footed wait-and-see pattern, and I would not say that our real estate colleagues are working actively at this point. I think we did what we could do. We sort of went as far as we could with a good faith offer, and that was not well received at the time, so we're just trying to stay in the background and keep pretty low-key while these processes unfold. But that's not to say that I don't like staying up to date on it. In fact, I was Googling it today to see what the deal is with the sand quarry permit application and the environmental review process around it. So I'd love to keep it on the radar of this group since it is within the plan area and has some important resources, but would probably be a sort of a coalition play if we were going to be making a move for it if that opportunity arose in the future.
So Abby, you may be aware, but the EIR will probably be delayed late summer, perhaps even early fall, but late summer right now is the new target date.
I thought it was right about to come out.
No. We have been in touch with Rob Eastwood at County Planning, and it has now been pushed back to late summer.
Thank you for telling me that.
Welcome.
I will let our real estate shop know that.
Okay.
Okay, does anything else? Nothing to add for a future meeting?
So at the meeting in May, we'll talk about the budget with you, a few other things. Hopefully I'll have good news on a Section 6 grant award. And at a
we'll be
later
ready
date.
to break the champagne cork on Tilton.
Correct. Yeah, I can, yeah. We can break the champagne outside.
Off a camera view?
Yes, off camera view.
Hey, Edmund, would you mind sending me the map?
Yeah, gladly.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Okay, so I'll adjourn the meeting without if I don't hear anything more, 8:12.